What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, we are discussing which teams have the best fixtures to start off the season, and also from those teams, which players should we be looking at putting in our Game Week 1 squad, and of course, which ones should we be avoiding as well, even if the fixtures are good. So if you find this type of video useful, please do give it a like. Keep hitting that subscribe button. We are well on target to hit 300,000 before Game Week 1. So hit that button if you haven't already, and let's jump into it. So this video has kindly been sponsored by Fantasy Football Scout, and I want to show you how one of the tools in their members area, which you can sign up for in the link in the description below, can help you throughout the season, and also how it's helping me for this video, which is specifically around different fixtures, right? So this is one of the tools in the members area. There's a lot here on this sidebar, but I've gone for the season ticker. Now this will show you every single team in the Premier League and the fixtures they've got over whatever number of game weeks you want. So right now it's set to 10. You can make that smaller if you want and just set it to 6, which is probably what I'll be looking at today, or you can make it much bigger, however you want to do it. And if, for example, you were looking for two 4.5 million goalkeepers that rotate nicely over the first however many weeks it is, and you want to go for Melier, for example, from Leeds, you can just click on Leeds there, come down and click rotation, and that will then show you which teams best rotate with Leeds from kind of best to worst. So you know, again, who to avoid and who not to avoid as well. The cool thing about this as well is you can look further ahead. You don't have to look just at the next game week. So again, if I put it down to kind of the next 5 game weeks, and I'm thinking, okay, I want this certain player from game week 1, but from game week 6, they've got a bad run of fixtures, and so I'm going to need to transfer them out. Let me see who from game week 6 or game week 7 has better fixtures. So all you do is come down to this bar at the bottom, and you just put it to where you want it to start. So if we go to game week 7, for example, which is when a lot of people might be looking to wildcard, we'll have different teams at the top. So again, I'll just click on difficulty, and it will show you it from game week 7. So West Ham, a team I'm not really looking to target from game week 1, might be really good to look at from game week 7 instead. Nottingham Forest, for example, you might want to keep one of their strikers. Leicester, it might be time to jump on their players, etc, etc. So it's a really handy tool throughout the season. I'm using it in this video to get the best fixtures in the first 6, but there's loads of different ways you can use it, and there's a hell of a lot of other members tools as well. So if you want to sign up for that, link in the description below, and you can go for it monthly or yearly, however you want to do it. Okay, so we'll start off with Wolves, and if you've seen any of my pre-season content involving Pedro Neto, you'll already have seen these fixtures quite a few times, okay? Now, obviously they're good, otherwise they wouldn't be in this video, but it's about as good as it gets from Game Week 1. Leeds, Fulham, Newcastle, Bournemouth, Southampton. You could argue as a set of 6 fixtures, that is slightly better for an attacker than a defender, but I think overall it's pretty good for either. Now, I won't spend loads of time on this, but I do think that Pedro Neto probably is the best attacking option at Wolves. I think the other midfielders just aren't as good in attack, or they're a little bit more expensive in Hwang, and I don't think it's worth spending 0.5 more. And I definitely don't think it's worth spending 1.5 million more on Jimenez. I just think he was quite poor last year. His output had kind of dropped from previous seasons, and I don't know if he's going to be any better this season. I'd rather kind of wait and see. Wolves were poor last year. We talked about this before, how their expected goals was only, second to Norwich, which isn't great at all. There is some talk about them moving to a 4 at the back formation. Whether that will happen, we'll have to keep an eye in pre-season. Maybe that will help them in attack and hinder them in defence. Again, all that remains to be seen, but it is worth keeping an eye on. If they do switch to a 4 at the back, that might help them in attack, and it might make someone like Neto even better. But I just look at the rest of the options, and I just don't think there's a better option there. So if you don't like Neto, I think you just avoid Wolves' attack completely from the start and just see how things go. Defensively, they only conceded about 43 goals last year. Their expected goals conceded was about 52. So Jose Sarr made a big difference to the amount of goals they conceded. And I know what people will say, he's a goalkeeper, he's supposed to save shots, and I get it. But if they conceded that many chances again this season, I'm not convinced they would only concede that few goals. I think they would probably concede some more. So ideally, we want them to get a bit better in stopping those chances in the first place. Because of that, I don't know if I would go for Jose Sarr. I mean, you could make a case because of the fixtures, but I feel like there might be better £5 million goalkeeper options like Mendy, for example. If you didn't want to go for Mendy because you already had Reece James or Chilwell or someone like that, maybe you go for Sarr, but obviously Ramsdale's an option as well. So it's not like a dead cert that you go for Jose Sarr. Maybe if he'd been 4.5, we would have jumped at it. In defence, Collins has come in now. I think it's hard to say exactly who is going to be first choice centre-back. There's a lot of hype around him from Wolves fans, so I feel like he'll slot straight in. But if they do move to 4 at the back, that's obviously one less spot for a centre-back. They've got Cody, Kilman and Bolly, so that might be an issue. Best option right now is probably Johnny. While Semedo is injured, you would assume that Johnny will play right back and Aït-Nouri will play left back. Once Semedo is back, there might be an issue there with rotation, but until that happens, Johnny looks like the cheapest and probably most attacking option in that back line. So the two players for me really are Neto and Johnny, unless pre-season tells us a little bit more. Okay, so I'm a little bit conscious about going over old ground in these videos. We talked a lot about Saka, Jesus and Tomiyasu, so I'll keep it brief just in case anyone is watching my channel for the first time and has found this video. So I think for 8 million, both Saka and Jesus are genuine options. If you only want to go for one, I think I would probably go for Jesus, because when I think about the number of midfielders I really like, there's a lot more than there probably is in forward. So if you've got that money to spend, taking up a forward slot and then maybe getting a cheaper midfielder at 4.5 is probably the better option. That does not make Saka a bad option though. I think when you compare him just solely to the other £8 million midfielders, he's right up there because of consistent starts, obviously the good fixtures they got as well. So I like both of them, and I think for 4.5 million, if you're only having one of those defenders, Tomiyasu might be your best bet. But as you can see, he's not necessarily that attacking, right? 0.08 expected goal involvement is less than Gabriel. And most of Gabriel's is made up from goal threat. So if you were putting an Arsenal player in your team to play every week and you could afford the extra 0.5 million, then Gabriel could be an option instead of Tomiyasu. Tierney is also a pretty attacking option. If he's fit, he'll be decent. The problem is he doesn't necessarily stay fit for very long, and I've had him a couple of times over the last couple of seasons, and he's always always feels like a transfer waiting to happen. So it might just be better off going for Gabriel from the start. I will say, because obviously transfers are going on all the time in pre-season, there is talk about Zinchenko moving from Man City to Arsenal. Maybe by the time you watch this video, that transfer will be done. He is a £5 million defender as he's listed in FPL, but if he goes to Arsenal, there is a good chance, I think at least anyway, that he could play in midfield. And if that happens, it doesn't necessarily make him a much better option than everyone else, because a defender going straight to midfield doesn't necessarily make them more attacking. Look at Trent, look at Reece James, look at Robertson, etc. Right? They're not necessarily midfielders. They're right backs, left backs, or wing backs, right? So it doesn't necessarily make him better, but I think if he's playing as an 8 in a 4-3-3, that could be interesting. And I think it probably would put him ahead of all the other defenders. So keep an eye on that. Just finish off with Martinelli, because I've already kind of touched on Ramsdale when we were talking about Jose Sarr. If you think he gets good regular minutes, Martinelli is a brilliant option. You look at those numbers there, expected goal involvement for Saka and Martinelli. Martinelli is actually slightly ahead, and he's 2 million cheaper. Now, obviously, some of that money is well spent on Saka because you get guaranteed starts. But if Martinelli gets regular minutes towards the beginning of the season when they don't have Europe to contend with, and Smith Rowe is sat on the bench, Martinelli could be a really shrewd pick. And the fixtures are so good, and I don't see a huge amount of rotation early on, that you could arguably go for 2 or 3 Arsenal players. Jesus and Saka and a defender, or Jesus and Martinelli and a defender. I don't think you go far wrong with that. I think when you see a fixture list for Man City that's got 3 home games in the first 5 and 2 of them are newly promoted sides in Bournemouth and Nottingham Forest, you want a piece of that. That just looks like goals to me. I'll just quickly cover off the 2 premium players, Haaland and De Bruyne. I just don't think De Bruyne is a good option from the start. I think there's better premium attackers from different teams, and I think in his own team, as long as Haaland is starting week in, week out, which again, without Europe, I would hope he would do early on as long as he's fit, I think he's a better option than De Bruyne. Again, a lot of people say to me, well, now Haaland's there, De Bruyne is going to get loads of assists because Haaland's playing. That means Haaland's going to score loads of goals. That means he's going to get bonus. And he should, hopefully, at least early on, do a bit better than De Bruyne. So Haaland's the one I'd go for. Outside of that, it gets very difficult to pick a Man City attacker because you just don't know who's going to play week to week. Like Grealish, Bernardo Silva, Foden, obviously Mahrez as well. They've lost Sterling, they've lost Jesus, but they've still got so many options. It's hard to know week to week who's going to play. I've put Foden on there because last year he did get 24 starts, and I would hope that he'd be a key part of Pep's plans early on. But I've got to be honest, at the start of the season, especially if everyone is fit, I don't know if I would go for a £8 million Man City midfielder. I'd probably go for one of the slightly safer options, even if it's a little bit more boring. But I don't know. If you get the right one, you know, those fixtures are crazy, and we know that Man City are going to score a lot of goals. So if you've got a feeling that Grealish is going to get lots more starts this year, or Mahrez is going to get plenty of starts on the right, just go for them, because there's a lot of points potential there. I think a lot of it depends on how you're going to react if they get benched, because some FPL managers, they'll buy a player, they'll know they're not nailed on, they'll know there's a chance of a benching, but they still panic when that benching happens. So you have to be prepared for that. I think there's less chance of that happening with Haaland or De Bruyne. In defence, it's pretty easy. If you've got the money, you go for Cancelo. Again, talking about possible transfers, even if they buy Cucurella and he plays left back, I think Cancelo will get a lot of minutes at right back. And if Walker plays, I think Cancelo will play on the left, because he's just so creative, right? And the way he just slots into midfield when City are in possession is really key to how Pep plays. So if you've got the money, you go for Cancelo. If you don't, you probably go for Diaz. One of the things with Man City defenders is Laporte was pretty much nailed on last year, but it was Stones who was pretty much nailed on the year before. So it's always difficult to know exactly how Pep's going to go early season. My assumption is it'll be Diaz and Laporte again, but I think Diaz is the one you expect to see most weeks. So if you can't afford Cancelo, or you want to go down a little bit in price, you could just go for Diaz, or double up, right, as well. And the other option is Ederson for 5.5 million if you want to go for an expensive goalie. I just don't like doing that, but he is still a good option if that's the way you want to go. So in my opinion, Liverpool are by far and away the best side to target for FPL. They might not score quite as many goals as Man City, or keep quite as many clean sheets as them either, but they'll get extremely close and they will rotate a hell of a lot less. So it's very easy, at least for me anyway. Salah goes into your Game Week 1 side, Trent Alexander-Arnold goes into your Game Week 1 side. The prices are not high enough to put me off going for either of those players. They're extremely consistent. Trent's the most attacking defender in the game, and Salah is an obvious captain pick for a lot of weeks, right? So we can talk about how no one is differential, you know, we can talk about it all day, but they're really great options, and I would have them in my Game Week 1 side. The only key question really, there's another really, is who is your third pick? And I think because the early wildcard looks pretty much locked in, I'm not saying there's a specific game week that is best to use it, but if you're going to use it between game weeks 5 and 8, you're then going to be able to make a completely new team, and therefore you're trying to get the most, we're always trying to get the most points, right? But you're trying to do it in a short space of time, in which case I would go for players that are capable of bigger hauls rather than necessarily being as consistent. So Alisson, for example, super consistent. He'll probably be the highest scoring goalkeeper again this year, but over a short space of time, if you're banking on the most points, are you going for Alisson or are you going for Robertson or Diaz? I think you're going for one of the other two, and that is why I wouldn't go for Matip, just in case there's a bit more rotation this year, and I wouldn't go for Van Dijk either. I think you just spend the extra money for Robertson, or if you're happy with your defence and you've still got a Liverpool spot free, you probably go for Diaz. It's very close between those two. I think if Jota does miss the start of the season through the hamstring injury that he's apparently been having issues with in pre-season, then Diaz is a great option, but Robertson's so consistent, and him and Trent Alexander-Arnold just don't get rotated that often with their fullback backups. So yeah, Salah and Trent easy, then just pick your third one. Okay, so just before we talk about Chelsea, I just wanted to reiterate that I am recording some of these videos in advance, right? Just so that I'm not spending the whole summer recording videos literally every single day, right? So some of them are done in advance. So I do try and touch on what transfers are being reported in the media, but some of them might get locked in after I've recorded. So with Chelsea, for example, it looks like Ake is staying at Man City, Koulibaly is pretty much done, and Kimpembe may happen as well. So it looks like they might get two pretty solid signings to just improve that defence. Obviously, they've lost a few players, like Christensen's gone, Rudiger, etc. But it looks like they're strengthening pretty well. Koulibaly is an excellent transfer, for example. So I'm quite high on the Chelsea defence. I think, look, I wish there was a few more home games in those easier fixtures, so Everton, Leeds and Southampton in particular. But James and Chilwell at 6 million just feel cheap. And if they're still playing wing-back, even if they don't keep clean sheets, their attacking threat is super high, especially Reece James. Like, Chilwell is good as well, but I'd probably put James a little bit higher. So I think one of them, it's not a must, But I think it's a really, really, really good option. I've got both of them in my current draft, or at least I'm trying to work both of them into my current draft. I think Mendy is also good at 5 million. But again, the goalkeeper's almost like the most boring spot. So if you've gone for James and Chilwell, I wouldn't like get rid of one of them just so I could have Mendy. I'd either get on board with a triple up or just go for a different goalkeeper, because what Mendy can do and what James and Chilwell can do in a given game are just completely different. So I do like Mendy, but James and Chilwell are definitely better. In terms of attackers, I think the three on screen are probably the best, probably the most nailed on as well, unless Chelsea sign a new striker. Mason Mount, very consistent last year, 0.56 expected goal involvement, was proper decent. And again, he's right up there in terms of best value £8 million midfielders. I think Sterling could be a better option, hence the price tag, of course. And he will get more minutes at Chelsea. He might even be the main man, to be honest, which he never really has been at Man City, just because of the sheer amount of options they've had. And I think that will really help him. I think knowing that pretty much every week he's going to start, not literally, but most weeks, will really help. I just think at the start of the season, given how people's squads are, unless you're willing to compromise a little bit in defence possibly, maybe only go with one of Salah, Haaland or Kane or Son, it's very hard to fit in that £10 million midfielder into your Game Week 1 squads. So I think Sterling will be an option at some point this season. And I think he is a good option from the start. I just think there's better options and better ways to build your squad. So it's not that I don't like him. I just don't necessarily like that kind of price point. And similarly with Havertz, I think if it's between him and Mount, you probably go for Mason Mount. And again, if you're going for an £8 million forward, you might be better off with Jesus. So I quite like the fixtures. I wish more of those easier fixtures were at home, but I can live with it. James and Chilwell look brilliant. I think Mason Mount is probably the next best option for Game Week 1 if you're not going for Mendy. So I feel like Leeds are the hardest team to talk about in this video, because I don't know if it's just me, but it feels like there's a lot of unknowns there. So over the past few months, what's happened? Jesse Marsch has come in, obviously partway through the season. He's now got a full pre-season. How will he set up next year? How will he use his new signings and stuff like that? Rafinha's gone. That will hurt them in attack. They have made new signings. How quickly can they fill that Rafinha void? Will they be as good? If not, just how good will they be? And obviously then you've got all the issues about where they play. So Sinistera, I'm going to assume, is probably nailed on in one of the wide positions, probably off the left. Harrison started at left back in one of the pre-season games. Where does Aronson fit in? If he's playing, what about Dan James? What about Rodrigo? Is Bamford playing up front on his own? Is he playing with someone else? Is that Dan James? Is that Rodrigo? Is that Gelhardt? These are all things that I'm not quite sure about. If you're a Leeds fan and you've got a better idea than me, please do leave a comment below. But I think this early still into pre-season, it's hard to really call. And then some people are speculating that the fixtures are so good, we could look at a defensive option like Meslier in goal. But I can't get past the fact that the last two seasons they've been awful in defence. I'm just not sure how much they can improve, especially like this early on, especially when they got so many new signings to kind of integrate into the team. How quickly will they gel together? And the point that I keep coming back to in my head is none of the Leeds players are really so cheap that I'm willing to take a punt. Like Bamford, for example, 7.5 million. He could absolutely do really well for that price point. His expected goal involvement last year was still very, very high. That was off a very small sample size, but we know what he did the year before. So he could be great. But 7.5 million, do I want to risk that early on? Sinistera, is he going to be the new Rafinha? He might well be, but at 6.5 million, is that really punt territory? I can get Neto for $1 million less. I can get Rashford for the same price. Again, for some of you, you'll be like more willing to take a punt. I kind of want to know a little bit beforehand. Maybe pre-season will change my mind. And then Christensen in defence is 5 million. Everyone keeps telling me how attacking he is, right? I've seen his stats and stuff. Plenty of goals, plenty of assists last season, so I get it. But he's a Leeds defender. Why am I paying 5 million for that when there's kind of fullbacks for other teams that are only 4.5 who all play in better defences? I know he's attacking, but he's still a Leeds defender, and I'm just not sure I'm willing to commit that much cash. So I actually like Leeds. Last couple of seasons, I've enjoyed them in the Premier League. I've enjoyed watching them, especially that first season under Bielsa, and I'm very intrigued by what they will do this year. But I feel like probably none of their players just have a price where I'm thinking, yeah, I really want to take a punt on that. Like Sinistera, 6.5 million could be a bargain. But if he was 5.5 million, I consider it from Game Week 1. At 6.5, it's a wait and see. And I feel like the same for Bamford. So the fixtures are good. I see why people are looking at Meslier. I still think Raya and Sanchez could be better. But if I was going to go for a Leeds player right now, he probably would be the one. Even Aronson at 5.5 is an okay price, but I'm not sure I want to jump straight in. So there we go, a look at some of the teams with the best fixtures. Hopefully it was useful. I know with Leeds in particular, it was a bit more about getting my thoughts out why I'm sceptical, but it definitely helped me, so I hope it helped you. It's just those price points. I wish they were a little bit cheaper across the board. Like Christensen, 4.5 million, I could take a punt on that. 5 million, I'm just a little bit more sceptical about going for it straight away. If it was useful, please do give it a like and hit that subscribe button if you're new around here. Thanks once again to Fantasy Football Scout for sponsoring today's video. If you want to sign up and become a member, there is a link in the description below. Very recommended. I've been using that site for about 10 years at this point, I think, so I'm happy to have them as part of this channel. I'll leave it there, and of course I'll be back tomorrow for another video. Thank you very much for watching. Hit that like button, hit subscribe, and I'll see you again soon.